Are you God? Are we actually God? That's what we're talking about today, and we have a lot to look at, including topics on quantum mechanics, sacred geometry, philosophy. We have a lot, and we're going to see how all this connects. Not only that, but we're going to be taking a look at the views of scientists that relate to this. And it's very upsetting to me because these views are not told to the public. Not only are these views not told to the public, but these views aren't even taught to people who are studying quantum mechanics or studying physics when they absolutely should be, because the views of these scientists are fundamental to quantum mechanics and understanding what reality is and revealing the fact that we are God. And we're going to see, so we have a lot to talk about today. And when we have, this is such an important topic, and when we have a lot to talk about, especially when it deals with quantum mechanics, especially when it deals with this topic, I tend to, get off topic a bit because there's so much to talk about. But I want to stay focused on this because this is, like I said, a very important topic. It affects you. It affects all of us, not only our lives and how we live our lives and our understanding of reality, but the world as a whole. And this is really important because this information that comes through quantum mechanics and philosophy and all that is really at the heart of what, it's been said in like the occult and esoterica and mystery schools that have been saying for, been talked about for thousands of years. So let's just right away, I want to bring this up here. And this is from mindmatters.ai. And it says that Schrödinger believed that there was only one mind in the universe. And the reason why we're talking about this, okay, this is really important. So Schrödinger is an absolute pioneer of quantum mechanics. If you want to go and study quantum mechanics, you are going to learn the Schrödinger equation, and the Schrödinger equation is fundamental. It's the beating heart of quantum mechanics, unless you're doing some like matrix interpretation. When you're doing quantum mechanics with relating to waves and frequency, you are going to be using Schrödinger's equation. So since Schrödinger's equation is so monumentally important to quantum mechanics, should we not take seriously, should we not consider what Schrödinger thought about reality and what quantum mechanics said about reality? Because Schrödinger thought, the way that quantum mechanics is interpreted today by mainstream scientists, by like scientists that believe that there's matter and only matter, Schrödinger thought that was crazy, that particular interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is the kind that you're taught all the time. Like, for example, let me give you an example. I'm already starting to get off topic, but this is important, all right? This is all related. It's going to be pivotal in understanding how you are God, how we are God, and why Schrödinger believed that there's only one mind in the universe. You think, well, it seems like there's many minds, but we're going to see why he thought there was only one mind. But I want to give you an example of like how twisted this is. Some people who watch my channel probably have never heard of quantum mechanics, or at least not looked into it. But if you've ever seen maybe like a documentary or a PBS space-time episode or something on quantum mechanics, you almost certainly have heard of Schrödinger's cat thought experiment, where it's a cat in a closed box, can be thought of as both alive. You go look it up if you haven't seen it. I'm going to give it, if you have a cat in a box with some poison that goes off based on quantum mechanic functions, like radioactive decay or something. But if you have a cat in a box with poison that could break and kill the cat can be thought of as both alive and dead at the same time. It's not until the box is opened that the cat wave function collapses in either to a dead or alive state. So basically what this means, and you've probably heard this before if you looked into quantum mechanics, the Schrödinger's cat thought experiment says, cat in a box with a, poison can be thought of both alive and dead at the same time. It's only when we open up the box and look that the cat is actually either alive or dead. Now, this is taught in documentaries, and this is taught if you go take a quantum mechanics physics course. This will be taught to you as an explanation of superposition. Schrödinger developed that thought experiment to show how ridiculous the current understanding of quantum mechanics was. To show, hey, if you take this idea seriously, you're going to be able to believe, you're going to have cats that are both alive and dead at the same time. So, see, the interesting thing here is that people are being taught certain ideas, but in the completely wrong context. Schrödinger's cat thought experiment was never something that Schrödinger proposed as something to be taken seriously, but to show how ridiculous that scientists who subscribe to the Copenhagen interpretation or the statistical interpretation of quantum mechanics is ridiculous. So what did Schrodinger actually believe? And there's so much to talk about here, because we're going to see how what Schrodinger talked about, how what others talked about, like Max Planck, lines up with things like sacred geometry and philosophy, and how it all comes together and shows that you are God and that we are God. And it's really important stuff. So let's just start looking at this real quick. The quantum physicist and author of the famous cat paradox, which is the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, believed that our individual minds are not unique, but rather like the reflected light from prisms. So if you look at the picture associated with this, you can see, if you look at the top here, there's a beam of white light going through, and the prism splits this beam of white light into the myriad varied frequencies of the visible light spectrum, into all these different colors. So you have this light that's a single unified white light that when it goes through something that causes it to refract, like this refracting prism, it then splits into various frequencies. From this unified single thing, a multiplicity of things emanates. So Schrodinger believed that reality was like this, that there is only one mind, but that it refracts into a multiplicity of minds, so to speak, similar to, using this as an example, not that it's exactly like this, but very similar to how light can reflect into the multiple variations of the light spectrum. So that would mean that there's really only one mind, and that each and every single one of our minds is one of those refracted elements or rays of that one mind. Now, is that true? That's the question. Now, the answer to this question is actually yes and no. And this is going to be critical, but let's jump in and see how it all works, because like I said, this is so fundamental to understanding reality. And this sort of thing, what we're doing here, people always ask me, like, how do you achieve a higher consciousness? What we're doing right now, what we're going to be doing is, I always say, to achieve a higher consciousness, what you need is metacognition, concept networking, and phenomenological experience. What we're talking about today is going to be concept networking, where we're going to look at ideas from quantum mechanics, philosophy, sacred geometry, and seeing how they all connect and form a unified pattern, that they're not disparate subjects, that everything connects to everything else, because it starts to form this holistic understanding of reality, this unified understanding of reality. Instead of seeing reality as separate pieces, you begin to see reality as an interconnected, evolving whole. That's extremely important for reaching a higher consciousness, because you're developing a new structure in your mind. You literally developing a new structure that allows you to conceive in new ways. Just like when humans developed self-awareness, they developed a new structure, the analog I and the ego, that allowed them to manipulate reality and interact in reality in new ways. And they were able to see reality differently and form structures that couldn't be formed before, like cities and governments and nations and all that. Likewise, this is allowing us to construct a new model of reality in our minds to be able to create new lives in a new world based on our new understanding of reality. Okay, so let's see here. So consciousness researcher Robert Prentner and cognitive psychologist will tell a prestigious music and philosophy lecture in London next month. The great physicist Donald Hoffman and quantum physicist Erwin Schrödinger believe that and this is a quote, the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, a universal mind accounts for everything. Again, this is critical, because think about, like I said, Schrödinger's wave equation, the Schrödinger equation, the beating heart of quantum mechanics. You go to learn quantum physics, that's one of the first things that you're going to be taught, and you're going to be using it every single day of that course. Almost. I mean, you'll get into things like spin, which may not use that particular equation, but for the most part, you're going to be using that equation. It's extremely important. So don't we want to understand what Schrödinger thought about reality, given that he supplied something so critical to understanding reality, but this is never taught. Schrodinger's ideas are never taught. In fact, Schrodinger's ideas are taught oppositely. His ideas that, anyway, so I'm trying to stay focused here. So the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, the universal mind accounts for everything. Now, just to pause again. Interesting, right? Okay, so Schrodinger believed this. Well, if you look at other, okay, how about this? The founder of quantum mechanics, Max Planck, famous for Planck's constant. You're going to be using Planck's constant, which is h or h bar, and the reduced Planck's constant, all throughout quantum mechanics. He was really important for understanding some of the foundational aspects of quantum mechanics, like quantization of energy. So literally one of the founders of quantum mechanics, absolutely foundational to quantum mechanics. Now, is his ideas taught? No, they're not. So Schrodinger thought that the total number of minds in the universe is one, that a universal mind accounts for everything. What did Max Planck think? Well, you guys who watch my channel have heard me quote this again and again, but I'm going to quote it one more time because it is so important. So this is a quote from Max Planck, the founder of quantum mechanics. As a man who has devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about atoms this much: there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force which brings the particles of an atom to vibration and holds this most minute solar system of the atom together. Importantly, this next part. We must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter. Very interesting. Some of these founders, pioneers, that are critical to quantum mechanics, whose concepts are used every day in quantum mechanics, but their views aren't taught. And they believed extremely similar things, specifically that mind is fundamental to reality. But let's continue here. There's so much more that we need to talk about here. Oh man, there's a lot to talk about. Let's trek on. In a world where many scientists strive mightily to explain how the human mind can arise from non-living matter, Prentner and Hoffman will tell the festival in London that Schrodinger was hardly a materialist. So this is a quote by Robert Prentner and Donald Hoffman, saying, in 1925, just a few months before Schrodinger discovered the most basic equation of quantum mechanics, which is the Schrodinger's equation, he wrote down the first sketches of the ideas that he would later develop more thoroughly in Mind and Matter. Already his thoughts on technical matters were inspired by what he took to be greater metaphysical questions. Early on, Schrodinger expressed the conviction that metaphysics does not come after physics, but inevitably precedes it. Metaphysics is not a deductive affair, but a speculative one. Inspired by Indian philosophy, Schrodinger had a mind first, not matter first view of the universe. But he was a non-materialist of a rather special kind. He believed that there is only one mind in the universe. Our individual minds are like the scattered light from prisms. A couple things to talk about here. We're going to look exactly and see if that's true. Are our minds like individual scattered lights from prisms when there is actually only one mind? Is that true? We're going to answer that question. We're going to actually be looking at sacred geometry and things like that to be able to understand this question more fully and see that this question is something that's been talked about for a while. But importantly here, Schrodinger had a mind first, not matter first view of the universe. And it says he was inspired by Indian philosophy. And Indian philosophy says that Brahman is the ultimate reality, and Brahman being consciousness. And that essentially that everything else is just a part of Brahman, especially the Hindu system of Advaita Vedanta. So Advaita Vedanta is very similar to what Schrodinger is talking about here. It says that reality, ultimate reality, is called Brahman, and Brahman is just, it's like consciousness. And everything is a expression and manifestation of Brahman, or consciousness. And what we are, they believed in the self or the eternal soul, and they called the eternal self or the soul Atman. So Atman is the self, and it is the goal of the self or Atman to realize that it is Brahman. So Atman is one of the expressions of Brahman, meaning ourselves are the expressions of Brahman, and it is up to us as ourselves to realize that we are Brahman. And you can see how this is similar to Schrödinger's idea that there is one mind that sort of acts like a prism and refracts into a multiplicity of minds. We're going to be looking to see if that is in fact true. And the answer is very surprising. It's different. It's very, very different. Well, you'll see. Okay, but you can see how this idea between what was talked about there is that Atman must realize that it is Brahman, but we can understand this if you think about the esoteric quote, "Know thyself, and you will know the universe and the gods." When you know yourself, when you realize what you are, you will know the universe and the gods, because you are the universe and the gods. You are all thing. You are everything. So Schrödinger did not believe that this was a material reality. He believed that it was a mental reality. And I can read to you a quote by Schrödinger. It says just that. Schrödinger says, "Consciousness cannot be accounted for in physical terms, for consciousness is absolutely fundamental. It cannot be accounted for in terms of anything else." And we talked about Max Planck. Max Planck said, "I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. Everything that we talk about, everything that we regard as existing, postulates consciousness." So you have Planck and you have Schrödinger with very similar views, yet these views are never discussed. They're never talked about, even though their concepts are used every single day. Without their concepts of, Planck's constant, quantization, the work he did with quantization as well, and Schrödinger's equation, quantum mechanics would be unworkable. I know there is a matrix interpretation of quantum mechanics, but quantum mechanics, when we're understanding the wave nature of reality, relies on these things. So another quote by Erwin Schrödinger. This is a great quote. Schrödinger said, "We do not belong to this material world that science constructs for us. We aren't in it. We are outside. We are only spectators. The only reason that we believe that we're in it, that we belong to the picture, is because our bodies are in the picture. Our bodies belong to it. Not only my body, but those of my friends and my dog and my cat and my horse and all the other people and animals. And this is my only means of communicating with them." So we don't belong to this material world. It only seems like we do because our bodies or our avatars are in it. So how can our bodies be in it but not actually us be in it? Well, think about when you put on a VR headset. When you put it on a VR headset, are you actually in the VR world? No, you're outside of the VR world. But your senses interpret the VR world, and your character in the VR game makes it seem as though you're in a VR world. Another way to think about it is like when you're dreaming. You are in the dream, but you're also outside of the dream as the dreamer. Now, this does not mean, since reality works this way, this doesn't mean that, oh, you're having a dream right now and you'll wake up in the real reality. And you'll have a real body in that real reality. A lot of people, that's the wrong way to conceive of it. When we say that this is like a dream or a shared dream, doesn't mean you're off sleeping in some ultimate real reality. It means that mind is fundamental, that mind can exist without a body, that mind is what is fundamental. And the illusion is that we have a body. I mean, we actually do, but it's not what we truly are. It's something that we have, like a car. It's what allows us to operate and maneuver around a localized world, a localized physical, quote unquote, physical world. So again, this stuff is never taught. You're not going to hear about this in a documentary. You're not going to hear about this in any course on quantum mechanics, which is absolutely appalling, by the way. So a metaphor that Schrödinger likes to invoke to illustrate this idea is that one of a crystal that creates a multitude of colors, or individual selves, by refracting light, standing for the cosmic self that is equal to the essence of the universe. So Schrödinger, I mean, I've said this again and again, but Schrödinger thinks that there's one mind that refracts into a multiplicity of minds. We are all but aspects of one single mind that form the essence of reality. He also referred to this as the doctrine of identity. Accordingly, a non-dual form of consciousness, which must not be conflated with any of its single aspects, grounds the refutation of the merely apparent distinction into separate selves that inhabit a single world. So, one aside I want to say right here. There is a difference between consciousness and mind, and it's actually mind that is fundamentally the fundamental nature of reality, not consciousness. Consciousness is an advanced structure or function of mind. But I'm not going to keep correcting that because it gets tedious. Okay, so just if someone may be confused, remember that consciousness and mind aren't the same idea, they're related. Mind is fundamental, consciousness is a structure that arises. So the ultimate reality isn't actually consciousness, the ultimate reality is mind, and this mind develops consciousness. But let's not nitpick for now, because we have a lot to talk about, and it's critical. So, but in Mind and Matter, released in 1958, Schrödinger, we are told, took this one step further. Schrödinger drew remarkable consequences from this. For example, he believed that any man is the same as any other man that lived before him. Okay, so in his early essay, Seek for the Road, he writes about looking into the mountains before him. Thousands of years ago, other men similarly enjoyed this view. But why should one assume that oneself is distinct from these previous men? Is there any scientific fact that could distinguish your experience from another person's? What makes you you and not somebody else? Similarly, as John Wheeler once assumed that there is really only one electron in the universe, Schrödinger assumed that there really is only one mind. Schrödinger thought this is supported by the empirical fact that consciousness is never experienced in the plural, only in the singular. Not only has none of us ever experienced more than one consciousness, but there is also no trace of circumstantial evidence of this ever happening anywhere in the world. So this is a very, very one could get lost with if one doesn't carefully read what is happening here. But it's a very interesting idea and critical. Schrödinger is essentially saying that the idea that for Schrödinger, this is what Schrödinger is saying. We're gonna talk about what's really going on. What Schrödinger is essentially saying is that there's only one consciousness. We have only ever experienced one consciousness. Consciousness is only experienced in the singular, never in the plural. So for example, you've only experienced your consciousness. You've never experienced two consciousnesses or three consciousnesses. So what Schrödinger is saying is that the reason why you've only experienced one consciousness is because there really is only one consciousness. That is, that my consciousness is your consciousness, is everyone's consciousness. We have just experienced it as a multiplicity because of this refracting phenomenon. So it's okay. So this is really here. I'm trying to figure out. Okay, hold on. Most non-materialistic. Let me just see where this article is going, because I want to show you guys some things that I think will help clear this up a lot. Okay, let me just read a little more. So most non-materialists will wish they have gotten off 2 stops ago. So basically he's saying that even non-materialists may think that this is crazy. We started with mind first, which, when accounting for why there is something rather than nothing, has been considered a reasonable assumption throughout history across the world, except among materialists. So basically, if you try and understand, like, how did anything happen? How is there anything at all? If we say that mind is primary, this isn't a problem, because mind can be thought of as logically equivalent to nothing. We don't have time to get in that today, but check out my video called The Answer to the Greatest Philosophical Question of All Time. to show why you have to exist, why your existence is logically necessary, that it's impossible for you not to exist as a subjective entity, not you as your particular body, but as an eternal subjective entity. But anyway, but the assumption that no finite mind could experience or act independently of the mind behind the universe is a limitation on the power of that mind. Why so? I just want to see, because there's a lot more good things to go here, but I want to talk about more ideas. Okay, so I think let's start talking about this. All right, so we're talking about Schrödinger. We're talking about Planck. They had more or less similar views. They both believed that matter was a kind of illusion, that consciousness was fundamental, and that a mind was behind all reality. Now, particularly, Schrödinger believed that our subjectivities were refractions or an expression of multiplicity of this one mind, like a light being refracted by a prism. So is this true? Let's talk about what is actually going on here. So if you understand, let's take what we are. What we are eternal minds. Now, what is an eternal mind? It is a collection of mathematical frequencies, sine and cosine waves. So think of each and every single one of us as not being a body, but being a mind, being an eternal mind. Now, let's, for the sake of illustrations, right? We want to try and make this as easy to understand as possible without making this a 52-week course. Let's use a circle to represent an eternal mind. Okay, so we're going to use a circle to represent a single eternal mind, which is a collection of frequencies. Now, Schrödinger believes that there is only one mind in the universe. So that would mean that there is only one circle. So here's the really interesting idea, okay? And this is really important. I'm going to point out first this, if anyone has seen this picture before, you're probably familiar with it, at least have seen it before. This is from a pattern in sacred geometry known as the flower of life. Now, what's very important to note about this flower of life is that it's just made up of circles. It's circle, 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 just a multiplicity of circles all overlaying each other that form this one unified pattern. So this is a multiplicity of circles, and this is going to become important to understand in a moment, okay? So, but let's just kind of leave that aside for now. This is all going to make sense in a moment, I promise. So let's imagine that a single circle represents an eternal mind, a system of infinite, near infinite energy and frequency. Schrödinger believes that there is only one mind in existence. Okay, so there would only be one circle. Well, now let's imagine, just for fun, let's imagine that there are two minds in existence. Now, to illustrate there being two minds in existence, symbolically, let's use two circles, okay? So you have just imagine two circles side by side. That represents there being two minds in the universe. Now, how do you know that there are two circles? Well, you can see two circles. The two circles are laid out before you. Now, how do you know that there are two circles? Well, because these circles are different. The only reason you can tell one circle from the other circle is because there is a difference. One circle is here and the other circle is there. So you can assume, so you know that there's two circles because there's a difference between them. One is there and there, so you can see two circles. There are two circles. Now, I want you to imagine, say you open some kind of graphics program like Photoshop. Okay, so let's say you open up Photoshop and you use your geometry tool to draw a circle. So on the center of your page, there's one circle. Okay, you've drawn a circle, there's one circle. Now imagine that you've drawn two circles and three circles and four circles. So on your page you have 2, 3, 4 circles. But imagine that you placed all those circles on top of each other. So you know how in Photoshop or some of these programs, you can drag around the shapes. Imagine that you drag the shapes so that they were all on top of each other. If they were all on top of each other, what would it look like on that page? It would look like one circle. So you have drawn 4 circles, but because you place them all on top of each other, it looks like there's one circle. Why does it look like there's one circle? Because there's no difference. They are identical. What was differentiating them before were unique coordinates. So imagine that, all right, you delete your project, you start over. Now imagine you go outside of your room and your friend comes in and uses your program and does some stuff, right? Draws some stuff. And then your friend leaves and you come back in the room. You didn't see what your friend did. You come back in the room and you look at what's on the screen. And on the screen is a circle. Well, if you don't know what your friend did and all you can see on the screen is that circle, how do you know that there's one circle there? How do you know there's not 2 or 3 or 4 or 50 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000? You don't know because they're all identical. For all you know, your friend might have just drawn one circle. Or they might have done 10,000 circles and they're all laid on top of each other, but you can't tell because they are identical. This is going to make sense, I promise. Now, obviously, we're not talking. Yes, in Photoshop, you could look at the layers and see if there were, but we're assuming that that's not there, that all you have access is to what you can see. So because these circles are identical and all on top of each other, you have no way of knowing if there's 1 or 2 or 10,000 or a million circles. You don't know. Now, this is something very important known as Leibniz's law. This is known as the identity of indiscernibles. So what Leibniz's law basically says is that if you have 2 things or any multiplicity of things that are identical in every single way possible, every conceivable way, they're completely the same in every single way, then logically speaking, they're the same thing. If you have things, a multiplicity of things that are identical in every single conceivable possible way, then logically there isn't actually a multiplicity. Logically, there is only a single one. So let's remember that. That's important. And we can see how this kind of relates. I'm using simple examples, but you can see how this kind of relates with the circle idea. So you have these circles. And remember, at the moment, there's only one circle. So what we're going to do, since we're using a circle to represent a mind, and a mind is of infinite energy, of frequency, and these frequencies form patterns. So a mind can form patterns within itself, and minds can form different patterns within itself. So minds that form different patterns are unique because they're no longer the same. There's something that differentiates them. So if you have a single mind, but then difference is introduced by the altering of pattern, now you can tell the difference between one mind and another. So that would be like, what that would be like doing is, say, taking your mouse, clicking and holding on that circle and dragging it to a unique location. Well, if you have a bunch of circles overlaid on top of each other and it seems like one circle, but if you take it and you drag that another circle to another location, well, that stack of circles at the center is going to stay there, but you're going to move that other circle. And now what's it going to look like? It's going to look like there's 2 circles. Why is it going to look like there's 2 circles? Because difference has been introduced. It has a unique coordinate. It is here rather than there. So what we're going to do is use the idea of a mind having a unique mental pattern, a unique frequency pattern. We're going to represent that as having a unique coordinate, a unique place. So why is this? So you can imagine that we could continue to do this. We could continue to drag circles. And as we drag circles to unique coordinates, circles to unique coordinates, we're having a vast multiplicity of circles, when previously there was only one circle because they were identical. And by Leibniz's law, when everything is 100% absolutely identical in every conceivable way, they are the same thing. So here's the interesting state that we have. We have a system where there can be one mind due to the law of identity. But it has the potentiality for multiplicity. That is key. How reality works, how reality operates, is that it is a system that can exist as a singular mind because of Leibniz's law, but has the capacity to express itself as a multiplicity. How? By introducing difference. And you can see that this is very, very close to the prism metaphor, because what differentiates one color of light from another is the frequency. It's difference. When you're putting white light through a prism, that refraction is causing difference to occur where unification was there previously. So you can see it's very, very similar. So you have a singular mind represented by that circle, but it has that eternal potential to be a multiplicity of minds. So it's important to understand when you are not when minds are differentiating in philosophical terms, you have a universal that is particularizing itself. So in terms of what's going on here, it's not like you're not creating new circles. You're not creating new minds. You are actualizing the capacity of the system to introduce difference. You see, that's really important. You or I or me, or all of us, none of us are ever created or destroyed. We have the capacity of identity and difference. In identity, we are singular. In difference, we are multiple or particular. So we are universal that has the capacity of particularity. We are individuality, singularity that has the capacity for multiplicity. We are an identity that can introduce difference for multiplicity. This is what's key, okay? And I really want to nail this down. It's not like they're being created. The system has the capacity to exist as a singular or a multiple, a universal and a particular. That's the capacity of the system. Logically, this is what the system can do. Another way to think about it, just in a metaphor, this is not exactly how it works, but if you think of those circles, when you're dragging those circles into new coordinates, you're not creating new circles. Those circles were always there, but they were an identity. They were all there, overlaid on top of each other. So when you drag them, you're not actually drawing new circles. You're just introducing the capacity of introducing something unique by giving them a unique coordinate. So here we have the system that is an individual system that has the capacity for multiplicity. And you can see, really how powerful this image of sacred geometry is with the flower of life. Because in a symbolic form, this is very close to what we're talking about. And you can imagine, see, each one of these is an individual circle. You can imagine this flower of life collapsing into a single circle. If all of these individual circles moved exactly and precisely to the center, it would be as though there was one circle. So you can think of reality sort of like this flower of life pattern that has the capacity for this flower of life pattern, but then can collapse back into a single circle. So it can be a single circle or this beautiful pattern, or a single circle or this beautiful pattern. And it does so by introducing difference. This circle is there and not there. It is here and not there. The difference is, of course, reality is much more complicated. It's not just coordinates. It's the idea that we are eternal minds that are each composed of frequencies. And these frequencies can take on particular patterns or unique patterns. When all of our patterns are exactly and precisely the same, then we are in identity, and it is as though we are one. We are one, but has the potential, the capacity to, the potentiality to be a multiplicity by introducing difference. Okay, so what's really interesting about this, though, to continue, is that cyclicality is actually intrinsic to reality. It's not just a metaphor. cyclicality, the circular nature, cyclical nature of reality is important. If we take a look at a circle here, if you see in the corner, there's this green circle. What happens when you put a circle in motion? And by putting a circle in motion, I mean by having a point travel around the circle, you get waves, which are frequency. So what that means is that as soon as you have a circle, you have the idea of waves. Waves and circles go hand in hand. They're different ways of looking at something. Kind of like how you can look at a pen this way, or you can look at it sideways. And they take on, it's depending on how you look at the pen. Here it just looks sort of like a point, and here it looks like a length. Same sort of idea, but it's one thing. A circle and waves and frequency are different ways of understanding that information. So when we think of reality, even this, like beautiful image of sacred geometry, this could be interpreted as waves and frequency. So, but of course, in actuality, we aren't a single circle, because that would just mean we would be a single sine and cosine wave. But we're a vast multiplicity of sinusoidal waveforms that can take on unique patterns. They can take on independent patterns here. Now, sorry, I just had to look at something here. Now, so let's talk about how we can understand this from the point of view. And you can see how Schrödinger was very, very close. And so the question is there only one mind in existence, or is there a multiplicity of minds? Well, that's the thing. When it comes to reality, it's yes and no. It's both at the same time. Words fail us. Hegel understood this. The great philosopher Hegel, he's my favorite philosopher. I love Hegel. Don't even get me started. I'm going to try my best to just briefly mention Hegel here. Hegel also saw reality as being a mind, a single mind, the formal aspect of which he called the idea, or the absolute idea. And it comes to know itself through its own othering of itself. And hold on here. So what I was saying here is that reality has this capacity for both being something that is singular and something that is multiplicity. And it seems conflicting. Like, is there a single mind or is there a multiplicity of mind? Well, yes. And the reason why I bring up Hegel was because Hegel knew that this reality was a logical reality. When I say reality was a logical reality, it doesn't mean like that emotions don't exist or that people don't behave in illogical ways. It means that reality runs on a system kind of like a code. And this is because, why? Well, because sinusoidal waves are mathematical concepts. Mathematical concepts are a structure, a system, a structured system. And so what Hegel understood was that reason, true reason, was that ultimate reality, when you look at it as a whole, seems to be a conflict of opposites. And Hegel called this the dialectic, a clash of opposites. But these opposites aren't actual contradictions in that they don't break logic, but they actually go together. So what I mean by that is, well, is reality one or is it a multiplicity? It's both. It's a singular mind that has the capacity to be a multiplicity. So this is what we're doing in life right now. In life, we are a single mind that has expressed itself through this multiplicity. And we are each eternal minds. We are each our own eternal subjective centers of experience. I really am a single individual mind. I really am that. And you really are your own single individual mind. And every single individual is their own individual single eternal mind. But we have the capacity through the alignment of our frequencies and our patterns to be one. And you can see we can be one in many different ways, because even look at this pattern. If you look at this pattern as a whole, there is one pattern. So even when our frequencies aren't identical, we are still one if looking at it from the pattern. Okay, and that's what we call the absolute perspective, looking at it as the whole. You can think of this as nodes in a neural network, if anyone's familiar with computer science and machine learning. Each one of us is a node in a network. So the network is one. You can think of this as a single network composed of many. So you see how reality, what Hegel called the dialectic of the one and the many, he was talking about something a little bit different in his Science of Logic, but reality is powered by this clash of the fact that reality can be a singularity and a multiplicity at the same time, that it can be something that is universal and a particular at the same time. We are going through this process of reality. So let me put it to you this way. Imagine that we're a single identical mind. That would be fucking boring. That would be boring as hell. It would be pleasant for a moment. You can have this experience when you experience sort of the pure, undifferentiated white light. Like that's a very similar sort of experience to that. And it's great and it's wonderful. But at a certain point, it's boring. So what happens is we as a single mind shatter ourselves into multiplicity. This was the Big Bang. The Big Bang was, in the Big Bang, scientists are like, oh, how did everything come from nothing? It's not that everything came from nothing. It's that there was a single mind in identity that particularized itself by introducing difference. And the physical repercussion of that, how that translated into what we know as the physical domain, was the Big Bang. Why? Because difference is what gives rise to this domain of space-time. This is a domain of difference. If there was no difference, space-time wouldn't exist. Space-time exists because there is difference. This cup is here and not there. That person is tall and that person is short, while that person has blue eyes and that person has brown eyes, and this person has long hair and this person has short hair. This person is here and over there. This reality, the only reason we can experience this localized domain is because of difference. You have no difference, you have no space-time. So the reason why introducing difference resulted in the Big Bang and the domain of space-time was because difference was introduced, and that was the physical manifestation of this. Hegel would call this the othering of the idea. It othered itself. He didn't believe it did so in the exact same ways I'm explaining it now, but he had a very similar idea to this. And so, like I said, if we're a single mind in identity, that is boring. So this journey that we have done is we have basically shattered ourselves into a multiplicity of fragments, and are now experiencing this life. But when we did so via a memory wipe. We did so that we would forget what we were. Now, why would we do that? Because there would be no point if we didn't. Because remember, if you think of this single-minded identity, let's say that is what you call God, because the whole idea is, are we God? If there's a single mind in reality, that is God. That is what we are. We are God. We are God that is experiencing ourselves in multiplicity. So everything around us is pieces of ourselves. Everything around you is ourselves. That's it. I am you, you are me, and all of this is the result of our work. Now, the reason why we would engage in memory wipe is because imagine that you're God. All right. So you're omniscient. You're omnipotent. You know everything. You're all powerful. There would be nothing left for you to do. You would have done everything. You would know everything. You would have exhausted all potentiality. So if you just shattered yourself into a multiplicity but didn't forget, there would be no satisfaction from it, because you would know that you would have done it. Like, it would be like playing a video game an infinite number of times. If you played that video game an infinite number of times, you would know every fucking thing about that game, and you would not want to play that game a single time more. But if you wiped your memory of ever playing that game, you'd be like, hey, this is a great game. This game's awesome. Let's beat it. So that is kind of similar to what's going on right now. What's going on right now is that we are a mind that has shattered itself into a multiplicity, and now we are coming back to remember what we are. Now, isn't it a bad thing to remember what we are? Isn't the whole point that we forgot? No, it's not a bad thing to remember what we are. That's part of the joy. That'd be like saying, isn't it a bad thing to beat the game? The whole thing. No, like that's part of the joy of doing this again. And it's not exactly the same. I'm not saying that it's not like we repeat the same pattern over and over and over again. But I don't want to get into that now. That would take way too much time. But the point is that the reason why we want to understand what we are is because we want to be at that point where we know what we are, okay? But we're still in a world of difference. because that's when we can start really enjoying life. Right now, life has been a struggle of survival just to get avatars that can acquire self-awareness and ultimately higher consciousness. But when we understand what we are and exist in a world of difference, that's when we can start really enjoying life, because we know intellectually that we're all connected and we're all one. We know that intellectually. We know that. But we are experiencing our difference, and we're experiencing our multiplicity, and we have the joy in that. And so we're no longer killing each other and hating each other for our differences and having all the sexism and racism and homophobia and violence, and it's my nation versus your nation and my God is better than you. We realize we're all one, we're all connected, we're all in the unified system. But hey, guess what? Also, look at this amazing world that we can do whatever we want. We can build whatever we want. We can learn about each other. We can explore our what makes each other unique. We can have amazing experiences together. So that's what we want. We want to know what we are so we can build what we call a planetary civilization as we go from the mode of survival to planetary civilization. Ultimately, we'll reach planetary independence. We won't even require a physical world to create anymore. But that's a long way off. Right now, we just need to get to planetary civilization where we have enough humans that start to understand what we are so we can build that new world and that new society with the knowledge of what we are. So we're celebrating our difference and we're exercising our power of God. That's why in the Gospel of Thomas, a banned book from the Bible, check out my playlist on that. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven isn't in the sky. It's not under the sea. It's all around you. You just have to have the eyes to see. Meaning that, hey, you're God, we're God. We can make this into whatever we want. When we just realize what we are, we have to realize, though, we have to understand what it is that we are. So this is important to understand. Is reality just one mind? No. Is it a multiplicity of minds? No, it's both. It is a mind that is a multiplicity and an identity depending on how its patterns are arranged. It has the capacity of both in that system, and we together are on this journey of realization in the domain of difference that we have manifested to enjoy. So you see, life is about two things: understanding and enjoying. You have to have both, because when you understand what reality is, you can build a more satisfying life. If you just go pure understanding and you don't enjoy life, there's no point, because you're just going to get, that'd be like playing the game, but like hating every second of it, or cheating. That'd be like getting to the end instantly or something. Like if you're just understanding reality, but you're not enjoying reality, you've missed out on 50% of what reality is about. The more we understand, and even what understanding is for, the more we understand reality, the better experience that we can create for each other and the better journey that we can have together. And that's what it's about. So we have to have, but there's some people who are like, oh, we don't need to, life is just about enjoying it. Well, no. Understanding and knowledge is important to be able to build a unified world free of hatred, racism, sexism, homophobia. We need understanding and knowledge to be able to create a better world, create a better society, ultimately achieve planetary independence, to constantly create better and better experiences and better satisfaction out of life. So the answer to this question is that reality is, Schrodinger and Planck were very close. Were they exactly right? No, they're very close. And it's a travesty that their ideas are not taught in universities today, because they're way closer to the interpretation of quantum mechanics that existed. That is taught in the current established paradigm. So there's a lot of information to take in this video. If you have to watch it a couple times, watch it a couple times. And I highly recommend watching my video called The Answer to the Greatest Philosophical Question of All Time, because this will relate to that. If you have the question like, well, how does this mind even exist? Like, why does it exist? How come there's not just nothingness? That'll answer that question. So check that out, the answer to the greatest philosophical question of all time. Hey, if you like my work, like and subscribe, and consider supporting on Patreon if you enjoy what I do. If you feel like you ever learned something or gotten something from my videos, consider supporting on Patreon. You'll get access to our secret videos. This week's secret video we're talking about is the brain and heart quantumly entangled. It's going to be good. It's how I'm able to do my work. A big shout out to everyone who does support on Patreon, especially Philanthropist, Zach, Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Michael, Angela, Maria, Top of the World, Ethan, DB, and Joel, and everyone else. The link will pop up over here. You can also help by hitting the join button on YouTube right below this video.